Welcome to another episode of Listen, Learn, and Love, hosted by Richard Ostler. My guests on today's podcast are a married couple, Jessica and Matt Frew. Is that how I say your last name?
That is correct.
That is correct.
So Jessica and Matt Frew, F-R-E-W, are married and in their 30s, and Jessica is divorced. She's divorced from her husband, Steve, who is gay, and that marriage ended, and Steve joins us on the podcast. So you will hear three voices: Jessica, female voice, and Steve Stoddard, who is Jessica's former husband, gay, out of their marriage, and Matt, Jessica's new husband. Steve and Jessica have a 10-year-old daughter, Penny, that obviously now all three of these adults are helping to raise. The thing that's unique about this podcast is that this family circle has stayed together. Even though a marriage ended, doesn't mean family relationships need to end. And Steve and Jessica are friends, and they'll talk about that. And maybe even more unique is Matt and Steve are friends. Just so everybody understand, Matt is Jessica's new husband, and Steve is Jessica's former husband, and that relationship inherently could have a lot of strain. It may have at times, but this is a story of three people coming together, finding common ground, and keeping the family circle together. And I think that benefits everybody, particularly Penny, their daughter that's being raised. When I called Jessica on the phone, they're calling in I'm calling them in Boise, Idaho. Jessica said, "Hey, just a minute, Steve and Matt are walking in together." And I just thought that's kind of cool that they are just coming to the table together to do this podcast. And I wanted to let our listeners know that they host a podcast called Husband-in-Law, and we'll talk more about that podcast. They've done about 30 episodes. Jessica is just been released as the Young Women's President in her ward. Steve is not active in the church, out of the church, actively dating men. His business is managing hotels. And Matt is just been called a couple months ago as the Elders Quorum President in his ward in Idaho. And we'll just talk about all of that. So have I said anything that needs to be corrected?
I don't think so. I think you nailed it.
You totally nailed that in a totally confusing scenario, but you nailed it.
We said a prayer before we went live, listeners, that there would just be things shared by this couple that will be helpful for you. Some of you are children of gay parents, marriages that have ended, and wonder that's not quite what you thought would happen. Some of you are coming, are one of the partners in a mixed orientation marriage that's ended, and that is painful. And some of you are marrying into somebody that's been divorced, that's been in a mixed orientation marriage like Matt has. And there's just lots of people around this space when it comes to a mixed orientation marriage not working that are affected. And if you're one of those people, or a priesthood leader, a family member, aware of one of these marriages, perhaps there'll be information shared by Steve, Jessica, or Matt that are helpful for you. I think one of the doctrines of our church and society is strong families. And yeah, when a marriage ends, that's not what anybody hoped for when a marriage started, but I still think we can be really thoughtful, responsible adults and do all we can to keep the family circle together, as that just benefits everybody. So, Jessica, Steve, why don't you just talk about, just tell us a little bit your story about being gay. Did you know you were gay young? Did it come later when you sort of figured this out?
Okay, so I should have known much sooner than I should have accepted much sooner than I did that I'm gay. I grew up in a very strong Mormon family and a strong Mormon community, and it was never something that I considered as an option. So even though I knew that about myself, it's not something I ever really chose to accept. I never told myself I'm gay. I just knew that my course was going to be to stay in the church and to serve as best I could and to try and align myself with the gospel and try to minimize these feelings and try to stay on the straight and narrow, marry a woman. I served a mission. Shortly after my mission is when Jessica and I met. We dated and fell in love and were married, and 6 months into our marriage, she confronted me because she found pornography on my computer and said, "Steve, are you gay?" And it was literally the first time I had been asked that question, or even asked myself that question. And over the next several weeks, of course, I had to come to terms with the fact that, of course, I'm gay, and this is a real thing for me, and it's something I've just been, it was absolute denial at its best. For all those years to have myself convinced that I wasn't actually gay, that this was just a minor little thing that I struggled with. I had never acted on it at that point, with the exception of pornography. I'd never been with a man. I didn't intend to. Jessica and I had that conversation. And she said, "I'm willing to stay in this marriage if that's what you want." And I absolutely did. That was what I wanted. We stayed married for another 6.5 years, give or take. And by the end of our marriage, it was very much an open topic of discussion, my sexual orientation and how that was affecting our marriage and my day-to-day life and my mental health and anything that ties into that. And we were very involved in various forms of support for gay Mormons, much of which we go into great detail in our podcast. And by the way, this is mostly what our podcast is all the details of this story. We're 28, 29 episodes in, and we're just to the point that Jessica and I are divorced. So 29 episodes. You just got the summary of our first 29 episodes. Basically.
What a great platform to do your story in a podcast, and so you can tell the totality of your story.
And we decided to do our podcast because anyone who found out the details from any of the three of us of our scenario was just fascinated and so intrigued about how we have maintained such a positive relationship and how the three of us work so closely together and how we are so supportive to one another in very distinct lifestyles and belief systems and life goals. And it was clear that this was a story worth sharing and that there were so many people that could benefit from hearing this and hearing the successes we've had and the challenges we've had and the struggles, and it's been a very positive thing to be a part of. I don't know if you want me to continue my story, but after 7 years, Jessica and I decided to divorce. It became clear to me that this was something that was not going to change and that was not a natural path for me, and that was not what was going to be best for either of us. All that came to a head when I fell in love with a man. I had an affair, and it made it clear that this was something I needed to simply accept and embrace and find a way to be happy with, as opposed to trying to force a life that really was not the best fit for either of us.
It's something interesting that I learned when Steve shared with me that after he had his affair, that he thought he was just going to be done. That was his one time and done, and that was going to change him. But it was clear to him after he had that affair with a man that he continued, that desire to be with a man continued, and he thought that was going to go away.
There was just a part of me that really hoped that, I didn't intentionally say I'm going to go have an affair to get this behind me, get it out of my system. But it's something I found myself doing almost against my own will. I just didn't have the willpower to stop myself from going there. But once I did, like that next morning, waking up, I expected and hoped I would feel regret and remorse and just feel dirty and be able to see that this is not something I want. This is not natural for me. This is not anything I ever want to do again. I'm going to move past this. But it was the absolute opposite. I just felt so incredibly comfortable in my own skin, having finally embraced this side of myself that I had never before let come to the surface. And at the time, it was a very devastating realization that, now what? What do I do now? This feels so right and so natural, and I feel so comfortable with myself. How do I possibly reconcile those feelings with the life that I have created for myself in my marriage with Jessica and in the church?
How was your emotional health, Steve? Some report at times really difficult emotional health and suicide feelings, suicide attempts. Do you want to share any of that with our listeners?
I do, because I think it's incredibly important to talk about mental health, and I went through a very rough time after that. My entire belief system kind of imploded there, because something that I was certain was unnatural and wrong suddenly felt so natural and so right, and I just didn't know how to reconcile all that with the life I had lived and the beliefs I had followed strictly for 29 years. So, and I also I didn't want to be gay. I wanted to just be content and happy and fulfilled in what I had. So for the longest time, I hated myself for not being able to be fulfilled and content in the church and in my marriage with Jessica. Like, I wanted that to be enough, and I wanted that to be what I really desired. And obviously, you can't change what you want. You can't change what you really feel. You can't change what is or isn't natural for you. So it was incredibly difficult to accept that, I almost saw it as I don't get to have that life. I don't get to keep this marriage. I don't get to, I don't get to follow this life that I have worked so hard to build for myself. I don't get to keep it. And that was incredibly difficult. I went through a suicidal period, actually for quite some time. It was probably a year or two that was a pretty constant thought, on and off at least. Very much, and much of that had to do with losing my future with Jessica. I was absolutely devastated. Even when we divorced, I never loved her any less than I had. It was devastating to walk away from my future with her. And it was hard to see her move on. It was really hard to see her get married and move on.
Were there any suicidal thoughts after Jessica and I got married?
No, I don't think so at that point. It was from the time we split Jessica until probably a year and a half, 2 years.
Yeah.
Although I don't know how long was it from the time we split until you two were married?
I think it was, as I remember it, you were suicidal for about a year and a half. That's where I was very concerned, where I had my phone on all the time and made sure to reach out and connect with you to make sure you were okay during that time.
Mostly for the year after that first year after we split, which was the time that we were living apart. You were in Boise, I was in Oklahoma City.
Yeah.
In a relationship with a man, the man that I'd had the affair with, the first and only man I'd been with. I fell in love with him, and we started a relationship. It didn't last long because I couldn't give up on Jessica and on the church and on what we had worked for, and I couldn't tell myself that I had done. There was still a part of me that wondered, had I really done everything I possibly could to make this work, to continue this path that I was on. And Jessica and I, we haven't gotten this far on our podcast, so anyone who's listening to this that's a listener of our podcast is now getting ahead of the story, but Jessica and I dated again. I broke up with my boyfriend in Oklahoma after about, I think it had only been 4 or 5 months. And I moved back to Boise, which is where Jessica was living with our daughter. And we dated again for 6 months. We were divorced by then. But Jessica said she was still open to trying to repair things if that's something I saw as an option. And so we tried for 6 months to do that. It wasn't... It got us to the point where we could say we have legitimately tried everything to make this work, and this is just not this is not what our future is. And from that point on, that's when I moved forward and on my side of things said, okay, I'm ready to embrace this and figure out how to live life as a gay man and how to be happy with that and how to date and how to find a partner I'm in a great place in life now, and have been for years now. It's definitely been a journey for me, learning what I really want out of life and who I want to spend it with, and but here we are today.
Here we are today. Jessica, thank you, Steve Stoddard, for sharing, just being vulnerable to share some of your story. This is obviously not the story you hoped would happen as you left on your mission in Bolivia and served. And, so thanks for sharing your story. Thanks for being alive. I would assume there's other listeners, maybe in mixed orientation marriages or not, who are just, or maybe straight people too, that get suicidal and need to hear stories of people that have been able to work through that. Everybody is better off, as I think you know, with you here. Your daughter's better off. Your ex-wife's better off. The people that are around you, the way you serve with your career, everybody's better off with Steve Stoddard here versus not here. So that's true for all of you listeners that may be thinking the world would be better off if I just weren't here. Jessica, so tell us where you grew up, and you just, you get married to Steve, and just tell us your part of the story.
So I grew up mostly in Idaho. I've also lived in Pennsylvania and Ohio, but grew up in a strong LDS family, and Steve and I got married when I was 20, I believe, in the Salt Lake City Temple. And like Steve said, about 6 months in, I realized that he was probably gay. It took him a little while longer to come to terms with that, but just really changed my thought process of how I viewed what the rest of my life could be or what I wanted from it. Really from that moment on, just thinking, okay, I got to accept all of the options here of what could happen in my marriage and what my life could look like, and be open to that.
People, I don't know, did you open up to family, priesthood leaders that you're now, in a marriage with somebody's gay? And if so, what was some of the best advice you got from anybody you opened up to?
I didn't open up to anybody for quite a while, just because Steve was not comfortable with anybody knowing. So I really wanted to have Steve's trust, and I knew that to do that, I needed to make sure to build that up, that he knew I wasn't going to tell anybody that he didn't want to be told. And he also did that for me, in that if I really felt like I need somebody to talk to, either he was willing to listen to all of the feelings and emotions I was feeling, or I need to go find somebody to talk to and be okay with that. But really, until we were pretty far into our marriage and we were going to support groups, that's the first time that I really talked to somebody about it. And it was just the ladies in my support group. Before that, I really, my parents didn't know, Steve's parents didn't know, nobody in our family knew.
Friends didn't know.
No, yeah, literally nobody knew. Steve talked to a lot of our to bishops
church
and
leaders,
church leaders and things, but I never really got involved in that process. I mostly let that be his thing, because it wasn't my thing. It was Steve's journey through that, not mine.
And Jessica was incredible at letting me open up to her at my pace, and it took a very long time. It was probably 5 years into our marriage that I finally was comfortable telling her all the details of how I really felt and what I was really struggling with.
I mean, I knew a lot of it, but for him to really tell me, to be very open about all of the things, It took probably 5-6 years into our marriage.
And to know that I could tell her anything and it wouldn't change how she felt about me. It wouldn't make her love me any less. It wouldn't make her leave me. And it, getting to that point took a very long time for me to be able to share with her those things and not worry about fallout from it, not worry about it affecting how she felt about herself in a devastating way, not worrying about, and not feeling absolute shame in opening up to her.
Well, that's a beautiful love story. I think that's what marriages should be, and I recognize your marriage ended, but I love, and maybe that's why you're in a good place now, is because you've developed that trust and communication and vulnerability during your marriage. And to me, that's just a beautiful love story.
So many people could look at this and say this is a failed marriage, but that's not how Jessica and I have ever labeled this. It was absolutely a critical time in my life, and Jessica was exactly what I needed for that chapter and helped me so much in my personal growth and self-acceptance, and we were great together for the time that we were together, and when we split ways, we didn't see it as the end of our time together and our support for one another, and we just very much had to redesign the relationship.
Yep.
How do you handle the "this isn't fair" question? Both of you could say that to God, or just in a quiet moment, "This isn't fair."
Jessica had a better attitude about it than I did.
So it's been interesting. I feel like growing up, one of the things I really took to heart, there are several things that I really focused in on. I feel like my first year of seminary in 9th grade. And one of those was the idea of asking why me in my life. And that never felt right to me to think, oh, why is this happening to me? Why is this going on? And I have always instead tried to focus on, what can I get out of this? What can I learn? How can I see this differently? And how can I use this for good? And so I think that idea has really helped me to be able to support and love Steve through all of this, and then to be able to see my life in a different way than I think most people would have going through these different situations. It helped me see, okay, I can take this and I can do this with this. I can choose to love Steve and help him through this process. Heavenly Father put me in this position for a reason. And I honestly believe a lot of that was because Steve and I needed to figure out who we really were. Steve needed to learn to love and accept himself for who he was and who God created him to be. And I needed to, I feel like, see the strength in me and understand that I was strong and that I could take a situation and make the most out of it, to see the best and to understand how I can learn and grow and then help others through that.
What a great answer. I've heard one of my other guests give that answer in a different context, and just instead of why me, what now? And that takes a lot of spiritual maturity to do that. That's wonderful. Because, here you've got, your whole dream is happening, temple marriage, and then it sort of starts to unravel. And there may be some logical sort of betrayal trauma with the discovery of pornography, and maybe later with that relationship, that would be logical, emotional things you need to work through. But I love the way you've been able to work through that and sort of move forward in a very thoughtful way. Steve, do you ask the question, why me?
I did. I really struggled for a long time to kind of move past, it took me a while to get Jessica's attitude of of not feeling like a victim, because there was a time, for a long time, that I asked those questions of why do I feel this? Why me? Why do I have to be gay? Why can't I why is what I had not enough for me to be fulfilled? And Jessica was incredibly inspirational. The way she handled our separation and our entire marriage leading up to it, the way she handled a scenario that brought so many challenges into her life, none of which she brought upon herself. These were things happening to her, things that I brought to the marriage, and having her handle them so well was incredibly inspiring to me. Even after we split, of me wanting to adopt her attitude of making the most of the scenario and not letting it stop her from moving forward and having a good attitude and having a good relationship with me. But it was a challenge to get there.
Jessica, when the marriage ended, how did you handle the shame, if you felt merit? Because, divorce is a hard thing in our culture, and I don't know if it made it harder or easier to be, so it was explainable easier and that decreased the shame, or I don't know if you even tried to measure that and just recognize my marriage is ending and and that's partly you speaking to other people whose marriage are ending or people that are trying to help them. Just share with it any thoughts there.
I don't know that I could recognize where the shame could come in. I don't know that I let it because it just wasn't, it's not really part of my personality, I guess. And I mean, I could see that. And if people wanted to, make me feel less than I was because I got divorced, then that was their issue and not mine. This was my life. These were the decisions I made. And I wasn't going to be shameful of that. I wasn't going to let that interfere. Yes, my marriage had ended, but like Steve said, I did not see that as a failure because we were able to maintain this relationship. And I felt very proud of us for being able to maintain the relationship that we had and to be there to support one another. And one of the main things, like when Steve told me, when we really came to terms with the fact we were getting divorced, I just remember thinking, I do not want to have a divorce where we can't be in the same room as each other, where my daughter feels weird at her birthday or her graduation or her wedding day because both her parents are there. Instead, I want it to be about her, that she can feel joy and happiness in those moments. And so I feel like from the very beginning, that was a conscious choice I made to see the positive. And if people had issues with that, that was their issue. That was not for me to feel shameful about. So I think that was really my way of dealing with that, if people think anything about me, that's not my problem. That is theirs. And I continue forward to do the things I do because I feel those are best for me, best for my family. And that's all I can do. And if somebody has a problem with that, then I can't change that they have a problem with that. So I don't know if that makes sense, but
I haven't been a divorce counselor, so I don't have context to know how unique the story is, but there's some elements that strike me as unique. And most divorces I know logically there's pain, and I'm sure both of you have felt pain, and that turns into anger, which is a normal secondary emotion, and that often needs something to be directed at in it. And it's interesting that, you could have certainly made Steve the villain. And people certainly would have bought that narrative because he's gay. He's, I can't quite remember when the affair happened, if it was before you divorced or after. So all the, he would be a logical villain. And in some ways I honor that because there's so much pain there, but I recognize what you've done is said the big picture here is I'm thinking of your daughter and and you're recognizing the good that you've always known in your now former husband. And it's a really unique story of just you being able to see the big picture and work through pain to be able to continue to see the big picture and see sort of the long view and long goals here that would be the best for everybody. So I don't know if you went to therapy to did that or just sort of figured that out.
That's something I figured out. And I mean, people ask me a lot, well, how did you figure this out? How have you done this? How have you created this? And part of it is I just think this is how God created me, was this way. And this is how I came. And I've made very conscious choices in my life to be the way I am, to see things from other points of view, to try to not look at them just, from the hurt and anger I feel, but let's try and see what other people are feeling in this situation. And I feel like that makes it so much easier to show up for people in a better way. And I think that's really what got me through our divorce without a lot of pain and anger. I mean, it hurt and I was very sad. I thought I was losing my best friend and this marriage that I'd worked so hard for. And so there was that sorrow and that mourning, but there wasn't a lot of anger. I remember one night getting really mad and just realizing this wasn't going to serve anybody. But really seeing that I knew Steve was hurting and he was in pain, and I did not want to add to that pain because I knew he was not in a good place. So I knew that if I could set that aside and really show up for him and help him to know that he was still loved and that I was going to let go of this pain and anger and forgive, that it really served both of us in the long run, and our daughter especially.
And you're texting Steve because you know he might be suicidal, and you care about this guy that's some levels hurt your heart or broken your heart or shattered your dreams. I don't think you use those words, but our society might. And then you're not buying into those words completely, although there's some reality of that, but you're recognizing him being probably suicidal and wanting to make sure he stays alive.
Along those lines, Richard, there was a time where I was convinced that Penny would be better off without me. That Penny would be better off without a dad than with a gay dad. And anyway, incredibly difficult time that Jessica helped me through and was able to see what I needed in that scenario instead of simply cutting me off the way she could have done after our divorce.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that out loud, Steve, because I believe Satan's real and wants to destroy us, but I think that's a lie of Satan, that to create a feeling in us that any of us are better off, somebody else is better off with us, somebody is thinking about suicide. And I like the Fallon model that we've talked about on this podcast, and the three kind of circles of someone who's suicidal. One is a feeling of not belonging, and one is a feeling that I am messing up my eternal family, and they're actually better off without me, because I'm a liability to our family or our eternal family in an LDS context. And then the third one is kind of a high degree for impulsive, risky behavior. What would you? We do a lot of podcasts, as you may know, with couples in mixed orientation marriages and that are successful marriages, and I've recognized those are beautiful love stories. And that obviously hasn't been your path. What would you say to those couples this is a leading question. What would you say to those couples to give them hope that those marriages can continue to work out, even though yours didn't?
So when mine and Steve's marriage ended, he is still a part of my family. We have a kid together. And so I think if you can view it from that way, as this person is a part of my family, and focus in on the things that you love and appreciate and respect about each other, then you can start to understand that this isn't the end. This is a new beginning, and there is more for you. You follow the path that you feel driven to follow, and trust that path. You trust yourself. You trust, if you believe in God, Heavenly Father, but I really believe you trust those instincts that are given to you. And I remember just thinking, okay, it didn't work out with Steve, but that doesn't mean we don't still have a relationship. That doesn't mean I have lost my friend. That doesn't mean I have lost this person in my life. I can keep him. But now I get to add somebody else into my life. And I know it was really important to me that I found somebody who could have a relationship with Steve and me and be accepting and understanding of that relationship. That was very important to me. Matt and Steve just gave each other fist bumps. But that was huge for me, to be able to realize that I can still have a relationship with my ex-husband even after getting married again, and recognizing that was something I wanted, and that it would be amazing if we could make that work.
I love that, and I love that you're maybe not defining a marriage ending by the legal requirement that we look at marriages ending and then so the relationship's over. I love the way you're kind of seeing past that and keeping the relationship going. And I guess part of my thought there is just, I don't want people to listen to this podcast in mixed orientation marriages and feel like your mixed orientation marriage is going to end, or even people going into mixed orientation marriages talking about before you're married about being in a mixed orientation marriage, that necessarily is going to end in failure. I just think every story is unique and every story is valid. And this isn't a podcast sort of trying to communicate to anybody that mixed orientation marriages don't work, or that if you're in one, I don't want you to leave. If you're in a mixed orientation marriage, I don't want you to leave this podcast having less hope. I'm actually hoping you have more hope, because you're hearing some of the things that Jessica, Steve, and Matt are sharing about how to keep a relationship together. Keep the communication open. If you both have a goal to keep your marriage together, that this podcast actually helps you do that. Anything else either of you want to add to those before we move on?
I would just love to add my advice there that, looking at what did work for Jessica and I for as long as it did, you've got to genuinely care about what's best for the other person and communicate that openly. I don't think Jessica and I could have gotten anywhere near as far into our marriage as we did if we weren't both genuinely trying to take the best care of the other person and provide them with what they needed. I think Jessica was much better at that than I was, but that can help.
Yeah, and I think you're exactly right, that every situation is different. Everyone is unique. And I'm a firm believer that mixed orientation marriages can work and be successful. I mean, Steve and I were married for 7 years, and we had an amazing marriage. And that doesn't diminish from the marriage that I have now, but it's just the reality that we had a good marriage. And part of that is because we went through all these things together, and we grew closer together because we were able to talk about the hardest things in our marriage and the things that scared us the most. So I think that you can, in any situation, make the marriage and relationship work. And I love that you're wanting to make people see that and encourage them to see that hope that is out there.
Jessica, what is the number one piece of advice that you would give to a mixed orientation marriage to stay together?
Communicate. You have got to talk and understand and listen to the other person. Try to set aside your feelings of hurt and pain as they're talking, to see where they're coming from, and instead see that as a beautiful way that they are reaching out and opening up to you, that they trust you enough to share these things with you. I think that's so huge, that if you can see that this person loves me so much and trusts me so much that they are sharing these parts of themselves that they are probably very scared to put out there. That's my advice.
I think someone needs to know that if they're going to be in a mixed orientation marriage, marriage is hard anyway. Relationships are hard, and this is going to add a huge amount of additional challenge and additional on a personal level and as a couple.
But it can be amazing.
I love these thoughtful comments, and I think it's easy. It just shows the maturity of you, because I think it's sometimes easy to take our story and want to validate it by bringing everybody else into our story and saying you should do the same thing. And so I love that you have comments that you want other marriages to succeed. And even though your mixed orientation marriage didn't, that you want others to succeed. And I think that's a real mature space to be in. Matt, we haven't heard much from you, but tell us how you got to meet Jessica and Steve. Did you know one or the other first? And just kind of tell us your journey and then falling in love with Jessica.
Yeah, so I met Steve first. We were all in the same ward together. I'd been divorced for about 2 years and living as a single dad to my 2 children. And I was going to this ward for about 2 years before I met Steve and Jessica. And I was kind of flying under the radar. I taught the youth Sunday school class. And so right after sacrament meeting would end, I would just jump up real quick, take my kids to primary, and go teach my class, and then get out of there as quickly as possible. I remember the first time I met Steve was in Elders Quorum, and I borrowed a pen from him to write something out in Elders Quorum. And I don't remember if it was that elders quorum meeting, but we both concluded that we both like mountain biking. And there was a group of guys in that particular ward that would go mountain biking together, and Steve and I were part of that group, and we'd go mountain biking together every other week or so, and got to know each other that way. And then at that time, Steve and I were both, this is when Steve and Jessica were dating each other again after they were divorced. And I remember on one of our mountain bike rides, Steve had mentioned that he's dating a Jessica. Well, this time I was also dating a Jessica. And so, yeah, that's kind of how that conversation came about. And then it was actually after one of these mountain bike rides that Jessica saw me getting ready to head out on a mountain bike ride.
She was checking him out.
And wanted me to come stop by her apartment after the mountain bike ride. And so I did. And it was a little weird.
He was very confused by this situation.
And I don't think you knew at that point that she and I had recently broken up.
No, not at all.
Yeah, and I went after Matt at that point. I knew he was the type of guy I wanted.
Yeah.
And she's like, Steve, who's that Matt guy that you're biking with?
So after that mountain bike ride, and going to, I complied, and I went to go visit Jessica at her apartment, and we spent a couple hours talking, and she kind of dumped everything, the whole situation on me at that time, and it just kind of blew my mind. So yeah, but that's how I met Steve and Jessica.
At some point in there, I got a text from you, Matt. I don't know if it was this meeting or afterwards, but you said, hey, Jessica just asked me out or asked me to come over or something.
I asked him out a couple times.
Yeah.
And this was, I think, fairly shortly after Jessica, you and I had ended things. And you kind of were like asking, like, hey, I know she was your wife/girlfriend up until very recently, like, kind of asking permission. Like,
yeah, are you good with this? Like, I don't want to.
Yeah.
I didn't want to step on anybody's toes. I didn't want to step on Steve's toes.
Yeah.
Because I knew that you and Jessica had been dating again. I didn't know what the details of that were, but...
Yeah, and I just responded that, you certainly don't... She and I said, yeah, she and I have ended things. We're going our separate ways. We're going to continue to co-parent, but she's dating and I'm dating.
And go for it.
Both of us men. Yeah. She's dating men, I'm dating men. But basically said, yeah, like, you don't need my permission now that we're broken up by any means, but, by all means, you have my blessing.
Right.
So to speak.
Matt, when did you know Steve was gay?
So it was in that, it was only when Jessica had told me after that mountain biking ride, where I did go over to her apartment, and she did spill everything of what their situation, what their family dynamics were. And that's when I learned that Steve was gay.
So we hadn't talked about that mountain biking? I didn't think we
Nope.
had. I didn't recall.
And how did that change your relationship, if it did at all, with Steve?
I didn't change it at all. I mean, yeah, I don't remember it changing at all.
I feel like we kind of... I'm not sure that mountain biking group kept going anyway, because shortly after that, a couple of us moved or changed or something. But I think I kind of felt a need to, like, step back a little bit and, like, let you two kind of explore things, didn't I? Is that sound accurate?
That's probably
that sounds
accurate.
about accurate.
I didn't want to, like, be in the picture and whatever, or, like...
Interfere.
Yeah. And I also, there was probably some part of me that didn't really want to see it firsthand happening, because it was all very fresh.
Yeah. But. So to answer your question, I don't remember it or having a feeling of, oh, I got to treat Steve differently now because now I know that he's gay.
Yeah, and I don't remember ever receiving any kind of vibe like that from you either.
Yeah.
It didn't need to change things or stop things or end things.
Yeah, I like that, Matt. I probably couldn't have done that at your age. It's taken me a while to sort of just be comfortable. And it's easy now for me to be comfortable around LGBTQ people. And And that's one of the things I loved about this story is you got there at a much younger age, and people that are 20 years younger than you are getting there right now in the high school level or the early college level. Any thoughts on why? I mean, I'm sensing you don't have a lot of homophobia. Just why?
I get this question actually quite often from various friends or acquaintances who ask me that question of. And no, I don't have any quote unquote homophobia. And I think it stems from being able to have confidence in who I am. I know that I'm a child of God. I also know that Steve is a child of God. And having that confidence first and foremost helps me know that I'm confident with who I am. And stepping it a little further into into like a man state, having an earthly man state of, look, I know who I am and I know who I am attracted to, and it is fully women. And just having the confidence of knowing what I want has totally helped me not have this quote-unquote homophobia.
Matt, I think it's really interesting, too, that you didn't, correct me if I'm wrong, but you didn't have a ton of exposure to LGBT people prior to that.
No, not at all.
In fact, so much of our conversations on our podcast over the last 28 weeks have been, much of that is new exposure to you.
Yes,
so it's particularly surprising that you were so open-minded with so little prior exposure to LGBT people. It's impressive.
But again, it's to that having confidence of who I really am, and knowing that I'm also starting to date this woman who just shared with me her experiences with her ex-husband, and seeing how well they were communicating also gave me a peace of mind of, okay, I'm in an okay situation right now.
Steve, did you resent Matt for being able to be the husband that you? I don't want to add to your burden here. The husband that you couldn't become or weren't able to be.
I definitely had thoughts of that. It was hard to see Jessica move on, and it was hard to, again, have to accept that no, I did not live up to that goal that I had set for myself of being her husband and the things that tie to that. But it didn't lead to resentment towards Matt. It was very much a personal insecurity. I didn't direct that at Matt, and I didn't want, I absolutely wanted Jessica to move on. I wanted her to find someone that would be the right fit for her, and for her to be able to get past this. And I really wanted this to not ruin her life, to not be a huge hindrance to her. And I learned real quick that there's no way she would have let this ruin her life, that she would not have given me that power to be able to ruin her life, nor anyone. And that's a separate discussion there. But no, I didn't resent Matt for it. And you and I had a conversation at one point, Matt, where by text or in person, I don't remember, but you said shortly before the wedding, Steve, I just want you to know that in my mind, I'm absolutely not attempting to replace you as Penny's dad or as Jessica's prior husband. Like,
right. I
honor what you guys have. I honor what you had. I honor who you are to her and who you were to her. Me coming into the picture doesn't change any of that.
Right.
I'm an additional person. I am not a replacement of any sort.
Right. It's adding to. It's adding to and making this family unit a relationship work. And it's not, I'm here to replace and I'm now in line in front of. It's more of, we're in a circle together.
And I think that was particularly helpful in my thoughts with Penny of knowing this is not going to be a power struggle of who's parenting Penny, who's the dad.
You're the dad, Steve.
Yeah, and you flat out said that, and thank goodness you did, because I knew I was the dad. And
it was interesting because I was having a conversation with my own dad on, I think it was Tuesday of this week. And by the way, my dad is probably our number one fan of our husband-in-law podcast. And he brought up to me, because he asks me in-depth questions of Steve and his relationship with us. And he brought up the fact that he cannot believe that Steve was suicidal. And he couldn't imagine Penny's life without Steve, her dad, in her life.
Right.
And he is so glad that you are Penny's dad and that we can all make that work. And yeah. And he said, I give you kudos, Matt, for allowing Steve to be Penny's dad, because that's who he is. I'm like, I can't replace that.
Well, I have a few tears in my eyes, to be honest, just listening to this. It's really an unusual story, but everything here is consistent with everything I know about what Christ would want and what our heavenly parents would want for their children.
And Richard, that's what my testimony of Christ, I truly believe, has helped me. And hopefully, Steve, you can accept this for what it is, even though you're not a member of the church anymore. But I know that my testimony in Christ has helped me, because I ask myself that question constantly of what would Christ do in this situation? Like, that is a question that is on my mind constantly, of what would Christ do in this situation? And I will try to consistently model what he would do in any given situation. So, yeah.
And I can absolutely accept that and support that, Matt. We don't have to share the same beliefs in order to
get along.
To respect what it is that motivates each of us to do what we do. And the further along I get in my journey, the more I am realizing that, or the more that's kind of the message I want to put out there to the people in my life, is that I don't want to tell anyone how to live their life. I want people to, I just think that whatever path you're on in life, it should be intentional. You should be there because that's where you choose to be, not because that's where you found yourself, because it's where you're comfortable, because it's where you've always been, because it's how you were raised. That is not a reason to be on a path. And if that is your reason on your path currently, I think you should take a close look and say, is this really where I want to be? Is this where I choose to be for myself? Whatever path we're on, it should be our choice. Whatever it is we believe, it should be because our heart tells us that that's what's right for us, not because it's what we were taught or because it's what someone told us, but because it's what we really feel is right for us. So I absolutely support you guys in your belief system and in what it is that motivates you to be who you are. And just like, and there's a conversation I've had with Penny quite regularly along these topics too, is we don't have to believe the same things. We just have to do what it is that our heart tells us is right for us personally. Yeah. And no one else can tell you what that thing is.
I love the principle of communication. I think that was, all of you have taught that at times in this podcast, and how to make a marriage work, a mixed orientation marriage work. And I know those of you that are listening out there, that's your hope, that's what you want to have happen. I would hope that this would give you more hope that actually could happen. But I think it's going to come to communication is going to be key. And I think most of the people I meet that are single and gay and want a mixed orientation marriage want to talk about that before they're married, and going into that marriage knowing that. And I would just want to give you hope that if that's your hope and your feeling, and that's your personal revelation you're receiving, don't keep that hope. Those marriages really can and do work, and I love their advice, your advice to others on that. Jessica, sorry, I'm calling you your daughters now. Now, Jessica, what's it like for you to have your former husband and your current husband be friends and like texting each other, and even right before the wedding, they're texting each other? This doesn't really happen very often.
You know what's funny is I'd never heard about either of those texts that they just mentioned until this moment. But I do know that they communicate with each other, and that if like I'm out of the picture for some reason, Steve and Matt can communicate and work things out, and that works. I also know that, like they take our daughters out on double dates together.
Double daddy-daughter dates.
Yeah, double daddy-daughter dates and things like that. And it's honestly overwhelming to me almost every day of complete gratitude that they can do this. And that I have these two men in my life that care about me and my daughter enough to make this work, that they are confident and secure enough in who they are to open themselves up to this type of relationship. And it really, like literally every day at some point, I am overwhelmed by the gratitude and love that I feel for these men. And it's interesting because I think a lot of people will say, oh, well, you must still have feelings for Steve or whatever. And I don't. I do, but they're very different. And I think that's something I try to explain to people is like, Steve feels more like a brother to me now. And I love him, but it is not in the same way that I love and adore Matt. And there are boundaries that we've set up and things that, we've had to shift and that we've figured out along the way to make this all work. But there are so many different ways to love people. And that is what this has really opened my eyes up to realize, is that I can love these two men in totally different ways, and they can love me in totally different ways, and we can still make this work. And
part of that is because Jessica has developed trust. Well, she's developed that trust, that bridge of trust. Like, I know that I can leave my home and take my kids to wherever they need to be for soccer practice or basketball or whatever. And if Steve and Penny and Jessica are in my home left alone, I know that I can trust Jessica that there is no, funny business going on because the communication is all there. So there's always been a bridge of trust that has never been broken.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why this works as well, is that there's so much trust.
Yeah, I very much took that for granted. Sorry, I very much took that for granted for the longest time, how amazing it is and unique it is that Matt is so chill about stuff like that. I just kind of took it for granted, the fact that most husbands would not be cool with me dropping by my ex-wife's house and chatting about things while he's not home. That's just not something most husbands would be cool with, but hasn't bothered Matt. And I think it's also
it doesn't bother me.
I think it's also worth noting that our Matt, you and my relationship has, there were some points along the way where one of us rubbed the other one the wrong way, and just kind of we kind of had to set up some boundaries. And I was a little bit oblivious early on of things that clearly needed to be a boundary, of me respecting, the fact that she's got a new husband. And it's just, we kind of had to figure out our own relationship too.
Yep.
And it sounds like communication is part of that. It'd be fascinating to have Penny on the podcast, your 10-year-old daughter, in 10 years from now, or 5 years from now, or 20 years from now. I would guess that this experience, she would talk about how this has made her a better person and a better mother and a better partner and a better person in society, a better member of our church. I recognized before we went live, Steve's not trying to pull, even though Steve's out of the church, he's not trying to pull Penny his way. It's part of, back to your maturity, Steve, is this is my life, but I'm not trying to pull everybody my way as a way to sort of validate my life. I recognize that the church, Penny, right, your daughter is enjoying the church, and, your former wife is an active member of the church and her new husband. But any thoughts, if have you already seen things in your daughter's life, Steve and Jessica, that you sense that this whole experience, while unique, is actually giving her additional skills and gifts and contributions?
I think Penny is getting the coolest freaking upbringing. I think she is. The thing I love about it, well, for one, she's going to be such an incredibly well-rounded person because she's been exposed to so many different walks of life. And I love that, unlike so many people who grow up in the Mormon church, they're taught this one path, that this is the way to happiness, that this is the only way to live if you really want to be happy. Penny has seen so many different paths that have led people to a fulfilling, edifying, happy life through both sides of, through her mom's exposure to things and through mine. And I have no doubts that whatever Penny ends up being in life, it will have been her choice. She's not going to end up somewhere simply because that's all she knew. She will end up on whatever it is that she chooses for herself.
And I think going along with that, part of what is great about this is I think it's instilled in Penny, first of all, a sense of confidence of, seeing that different situations can work and that there isn't one mold, that she can be who she is, and that's awesome, that she's going to be loved and continue forward, and that whatever path she chooses is going to be accepted amongst her family. And I also just think that it's filled her with compassion for a lot of different types of people, that she's very tender and aware of kids in her class and at school that she tries to reach out to and that she tries to show love and support for. And I think that's really what I hope she gets out of all of this is to love other people and to love herself.
I love that. Steve, why don't you want Penny to leave the church?
I would be perfectly fine if she chooses to do that down the road, and I would definitely be there to help her navigate that, because it can be a difficult thing. But I just want Penny to do what she feels is right for her, and there are going to be good things that come into her life through, so many good things that come into her life through her activity in the church, and there are going to be some challenges that come too, I'm sure. And it's clear to me that she chooses this not because her mom is making her by any means. It's clear to me that she enjoys it. And it's funny that Penny is very much me at that age. She reminds me so much of starting about age 6 through 10. She is just on so much the way I was at ages 6 through 10, because I was super into the church and I just thrived on it at that age, and she's very much the same. And so I support her in that. It's clear to me, if I felt like she was in the church because her mom was making her do it, I would step in and there would be a conversation about that with Jessica, not with Penny, but with Jessica, and eventually with Penny. But I'm confident that right now it's a good thing for Penny, and that's why she's choosing it for herself, and I absolutely support that.
That's a good answer, and I love the church, and I recognize people that leave. Some have not had the same experience that I'm having in the church, and so I like the way you're navigating that. And Penny, Jessica, do you worry that Steve at some point is going to try to pull your daughter out of the church?
I'm not worried about that. I mean, like Steve said, it's Penny's decision, and I also full-heartedly believe that she will choose the path that's right for her and what feels right. And if she does leave the church, then that will not affect how I feel about her or our relationship. That's just something that, I've been very aware of, that it could very well happen. And I just want her to choose a path that makes her happy and brings her joy. And I mean, at this point, like Steve said, she loves being there and she enjoys it. And so I know that's how I feel as well. And of course, that's kind of, what you hope for your kids is, I'm happy here, I hope they're happy here, but if they're not, then I hope she chooses what makes her happy.
I worried for a time about the problems it might cause, particularly for you, Jessica, if Penny ever chose to leave the church. I worry about that less and less as time goes on, which is interesting, because if that is going to happen, it will be, probably in her, I don't know, I shouldn't speculate on that, but I guess my point is, the older she gets, the more likely that possibility is. But it's not something I feel the need to worry about.
Nope.
We have navigated so many potentially difficult, truly difficult scenarios and potentially confrontational scenarios, and we've managed to do it just fine. I have no doubt that if Penny chose a different life for herself, that Jessica would not throw a fit about it, so to speak.
So here's the interesting thing about our situation as well, Richard, is that my children have chosen not to be baptized. So my children are 11 and 13 and are not baptized. Whereas Penny, at age 8, she chose to be baptized. And so we've kind of we kind of are navigating this situation currently.
Yep.
And so it has been interesting, and kind of our approach to this is we have to allow them their agency, and I try not to pressure, or I hope that they don't feel that pressure of dad's disappointed in me because I didn't get baptized. I try to avoid that as much as possible.
Yeah, it's interesting that Matt, that you haven't baptized either of your own children, but you have baptized mine. Matt did Penny's baptism.
Yeah.
How did you feel about that? Did you go to that baptism, Steve?
I went to the baptism. It was really important for me to be there to show my support for Penny.
Did you participate in any way?
I spoke after the baptism, when the whole family's together, and it's actually quite an interesting scenario because at the time I was in a serious relationship, and he and his entire family came, as well as my entire family, and they were, it was very much worlds colliding, but which stressed me out immensely leading up to that. But
I thought it was really cool, the decision of our bishop for allowing Steve to take time after Penny was baptized to say some words. I thought that was really cool.
And I thought it was nice that you asked Steve that it would be, because you asked me, will this be okay? Is this appropriate? And so I think there was just a lot of respect shown in that on that day.
It was interesting to me, and when I did get up to speak, I had like 5 or 10 minute message prepared, which was, but anyway, most of it when I got up to speak, I just kind of thought, everything I want to convey here is directed to Penny, and I feel like she and I didn't end up giving my prepared message. I kind of cut to the chase, and I shared a couple of basic thoughts and ended it, and just thought most of what I had planned to share with Penny I can share with her directly, and I don't necessarily need to do it in front of everyone here that may or may not take it as I'm intending it to be. And I just, in the moment, decided I'm going to keep this short, and I'll convey my message to Penny independently. But I very much appreciated the fact that you guys were supportive of me, of being involved in the way that I was. And Matt, we had an interesting conversation right before the baptism.
It was right after.
Was it right after?
Yeah, right after the ordinance of baptism was performed. I swear
it was before.
I was changing in the men's room, and Steve came in just as after I was
to use the restroom.
Yeah, just after I was done changing, and we had a really cool conversation in there, and hugged, and basically it was just a mutual agreement of we're so blessed to have each other in each other's lives.
And I was really grateful to you, Matt, for baptizing Penny. She wanted that to happen, and I was grateful that there was someone in her life that could do that for her, because I couldn't. And I didn't want some stranger or some, a home teacher or bishop or whatever. Sure, she has a relationship with them, but I was glad that there was someone she's close with and loves that could do that for her.
Right.
And I'm crying again.
I just, life, we have these dreams when we're 14, and Maya maids and teachers' quorum and priest quorum and laurels. I guess we don't call them laurels anymore. And for so many of us that are Latter-day Saints, the reality of our lives don't match those hopes early on in our lives. And we then have to sort of navigate, and hopefully we develop tools younger, like you mentioned in the 9th grade, I think, Jessica, about it's about what now, and what you've done. And so I think parents listening and leaders listening, we have to develop these kind of tools for the realities of mortality. But this baptism story is just, I love all the people working to create space there. I love the bishop. I love Steve. This church, in some ways we just didn't, you did everything you knew how to do, Steve, and it didn't work out, and I'm not going to make you the villain. Jessica and Matt haven't made you the villain. I'm certainly not going to make you the villain. I'm just going to recognize you're doing the best you can, and I'm going to leave it at the Savior's feet. But I love, since we're not making you the villain and we're not putting the end of the world on your shoulders, I'm being dramatic now, then I think we keep you better in the family circle, and then you come to the baptism, and then a bishop invites you to speak, and you feel a part of that. And it's not probably what you thought would be happening when you were a 14-year-old teacher, that you're, this other man would be baptizing your own child, but here you are, you're there, you showed up, and what that means for your daughter. And that makes me happy. So I just think I think your daughter's better off in some ways with, there's probably been some days that have been hard for her, but I think this experience gives her added tools and is part of the beautiful life she'll have. I'm trying to do these in an hour, but I never succeed. So sorry, listeners. That was one of my resolutions. How do you, as active Latter-day Saints, Jessica and Matt, Steve's hope is to find a partner. And that hope obviously is outside of the teachings of our church. So how do you navigate somebody's hope being different than what we teach? Do you hope his hope doesn't come true, or do you just hope his hope comes true and just, I'm not going to sort of judge his hope, and I'm not going to do things to keep his hope from happening? Any just thoughts? Because parents sometimes are navigating that space of just, how to manage that space when someone feels their path is different than the main teachings of the church.
His hope is his hope, and my hope is mine, right? But I still have to, I'm commanded to love. But I can't ever control anybody's own hope.
And for me, I just want Steve to be happy and content. And I know that when Steve is happy, content, he shows up in my life, in Penny's life, in his life, the best person he can be. So whatever that looks like for him, as long as it is not damaging to my daughter, and I don't believe this in any way is damaging to my daughter, then I support that and I will welcome that. He's had a couple of great guys in his life, and I've seen the love they've shown to my daughter, and I feel like, she can't be loved by enough people. The more people that love her and support her, the better. And I know that Steve is very careful of who he brings into her life and who she's around. And so I just don't worry about that as being an issue. I see it as an opportunity for Steve to be content and happy. And that's when he's content and happy, that's how we show up best in our lives, is when we follow those desires.
I love those answers. You didn't sell out our doctrine to give those answers, and I think that's a space that a lot of active LDS people are trying to navigate that, and I love your answers. Another question comes to mind. Both of you've just come out of a Young Women's Presidency, Jessica and Matt. You're the Elders Quorum President. How has this experience helped you to better minister to people in your circle? Because I'm assuming a lot of your circle knows all of this going on and are seeing how you're firsthand navigating that. And I assume that kind of signals at times that you're pretty safe to talk to about complicated stuff. Do either of you want to, let's start with Jessica. Any thoughts on how this helped you be a better or reach some young women in your church calling?
This is honestly one of my favorite things that has come out of all of this. And actually, I have lots of favorite things that have come out of all of this. But I love that people feel safe telling me things. And they also know that I am not going to tell anybody, that I am a safe place. I'm going to love them still, and that they can talk to me. And one of the things that I did have a young woman that came out during this time and who stopped coming to church. And I was able to show up at her house and tell her, listen, I don't care what's going on. If you want to be with us, come to church, come to our activities. We love having you. You make our ward so much better. Like, she just was so fun, and everybody loved her, and I just wanted her to be there. And if she felt happy and comfortable there, that's where I wanted her to be. And I knew she felt that I meant it, because she knew of my experiences and what I'd been through. And I really, at that moment, just really felt, like this is a blessing to be able to share these things and to be able to have people understand that I genuinely love you, even if you're making decisions that are different than mine. And I think that is awesome. And then just friends that have been able to share with me their struggles and their experiences, because they know I'm willing to listen and that I won't judge those where they're at. I won't judge their experiences, that's where they are and who they are, and that's okay. Matt?
Yeah, and I've kind of had the same experience where I've been in the elders as the elders quorum president for about 2 months, but in those 2 months I've had one of my quorum members just come out flat and tell me that, hey, don't know if you knew this, but I'm gay, and I don't act on the gay lifestyle, and I've been rebaptized and all of that. It's just been, with us being open about and vulnerable about our situation, it's created a safe place for people to come and just pour out what their struggles are, and knowing that they have somebody there who can understand and who can say, you know what, I know you're struggling with that, but we still love you. That has been huge. And it's been awesome to watch, because I can see it in this particular man's eyes that he truly loves the gospel and he wants to be part of it. So,
Richard, I think just in general, when someone knows that you have gone through hard things, they are comfortable coming to you with the hard things they're going through. And I think it's a fault in so many of us that we feel like we need to keep the things that we have been challenged by to ourselves and put on this facade of having a perfect life and a perfect, happy exterior, when there's no need for that. There's so much good to be had by being open and saying, this is what I have struggled with, this is what I have been through, this is how I have succeeded, this is how I failed, this is how it's helped me to get to where I am today. And to then be able to give and receive mutual support from other people who can relate to that, and who then come forward and share their struggles and their challenges with you. And
so it has been interesting in my experiences, because they did the church has mixed together the high priest group and the elders quorum as of recent, and so we have a lot of older gentlemen over the age of 80, right, in our elders quorum now, and with the young generation and the older generation being combined together. And there has been, in fact, just last week when I was giving the elders quorum lesson, there was several times where some of the older generation had to like check what I was saying again. Like, wait, can you say that again? Like, did I hear what you just said? Like, you have a relationship with your wife's ex-husband who is gay. Like, but it's opened up this conversation that's beautiful. And that shows that, whoa, I didn't even realize that this was a thing.
You've been blowing some minds.
Yeah.
Really good comments, and I love the inspiration that your bishop, your leaders, I guess an elders quorum president's called from a stake president. I love that your bishop, whoever called you to be young women's president, and your stake president, Matt, called you to be elders quorum president, called you as the right people instead of just the perfect family story to be the role model family. I mean, sometimes those families can be the right person to be called, but I love the fact that you weren't ruled out because you've both been through a divorce. And I think the lessons I call the wounded healer is a consistent theme on this podcast is the wounded healer can authentically lead other people out of the desert because he's been there or she's been there. And so we're all wounded. That's part of mortality. And I think if we can use those lessons and the woundedness that we feel to give hope on other people and be safe and to talk to. So I love that your leaders called you to, and being through divorce wasn't a deal breaker in their, so that they took that, they asked the Lord. I think you were both called of God from inspired priesthood leaders. We are at the end. We're at the hour and 20-minute mark, 80-minute mark. I'll go Steve, Matt, and then Jessica. Any last thoughts any of you want to share? Let's go Steve first.
I just want to say, Richard, that I so appreciate your platform. I don't know why this is making me emotional to say this, but for giving a space for LGBT voices to be heard. There's so much to be gained from increased understanding of someone else's perspective, and you offering that to particularly a Mormon group of listeners is, I thank you for that. It's awesome for us LGBT people to have a place for our voices to be heard and understood.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate that. It's my honor. I guess, my last thoughts are, one of the greatest gifts that Jessica, Steve, and myself have had out of starting our own podcast with the three of us is communication and building up this relationship and making it even stronger between the three of us. And that's been absolutely amazing to experience and to know that relationships matter and that it's this life is a journey and it's an adventure, and it's a great adventure.
And I don't know that I have anything else to say. I think the gentlemen have covered it. I feel very much the same. I'm grateful for this platform that you've created and for the things that you are putting out there and doing. And just as somebody who is involved in the LGBT community and that feels this draw to them and this love, it's so great to have examples of people who are also feeling that drive. And so I appreciate that from the LDS side of things, that there are other people who feel the same as me and that who are open to this side of things and understanding it. And so I love that you're creating the bridge.
Well, thank you. You're all very kind, but my guests are the real heroes that are brave to come and share their stories so we can all listen, learn, and love better. And Jessica, will you tell us just one more time the name of the podcast so that people can find your podcast and this longer version of your story?
So the name of our podcast is Husband-in-Law, and you can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook as well.
Best wishes to you, Steve, as you're moving forward in your life. We're glad you're alive. Love what you're doing. Matt and Jessica, you have a beautiful marriage, and this is just a beautiful story of the family circle staying together. And thank you for joining us, our guests, and thank you, our listeners, for joining us on another episode of Listen, Learn, and Love, hosted by Richard Ostler.